The morning Tobias stopped eating, his grandmother called it stubbornness. His teacher called it a phase. His father, Malcolm Ozzie, the man who had built a logistics empire from a single delivery van at 22 and now controlled 3 warehouses across Ontario, stood at the kitchen island in their Rosedale home and called it nothing at all because he did not know what to say. Tobias was 7 years old. His mother had been gone for 4 months. He sat at the breakfast table every morning, in his gray hoodie, hood up even indoors, and looked at the bowl of oatmeal in front of him the way a person looks at something that used to mean something. He would pick up the spoon. He would set it back down, and then Malcolm would leave for work because staying was harder than going, and he had not yet learned that the hardest things are usually the ones worth doing. That was the house Leonora Mensa Clark walked into on a Tuesday in February, her references in a folder, her coat still damp from the snow on Crescent Road. She was 41 years old. She had grown up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Scarborough with her mother and 2 brothers, and she had spent the last 15 years building one of the most quietly influential tech consultancies in Toronto, a firm that had advised 4 of the country's top financial institutions on their digital infrastructure before she sold it for a sum that still surprised her when she thought about it. She did not need the work. She had told herself she was between projects. She had told herself that after the sale, after the years of 70-hour weeks and back-to-back flights and eating airport sandwiches over open laptops, she needed something that kept her hands occupied without keeping her mind hostage. What she had not told herself, or anyone, was that she was lonely in a way she did not have language for yet. That her annex townhouse was very quiet, that she had started making full pots of coffee in the morning and throwing most of it away, and she did not like what that said about her life. The agency had presented the position as temporary. A household manager, essentially. Someone to manage the schedules, oversee the care staff, be a consistent adult presence for the child. The father traveled frequent Otter came twice a week, but had her own health concerns. The previous person had left after 6 weeks without explanation. Leonora had taken the folder home, read it twice, and thought about the boy in the photograph. 7 years old, dark eyes, wearing a hoodie indoors, and something in her chest had moved in a way she was not prepared for. She said yes. Malcolm was not home when she arrived. His housekeeper, a precise Filipina woman named Mrs. Reyes, who had worked for the family for 3 years, showed Leonora through the house with the efficiency of someone who had given the same tour before. The kitchen, the laundry, the schedule on the refrigerator, the code for the alarm. Tobias's school, Tobias's allergies. Tobias's preferred brand of apple juice, which was not the one currently in the refrigerator because Malcolm had ordered the wrong one again. "He's upstairs," Mrs. Reyes said at the end of the tour. "He knows you're coming." Leonora climbed the stairs alone. The door to Tobias' room was open 3 inches. She knocked anyway. "Come in," said a voice that was trying to sound like it didn't care. He was sitting on the floor beside his bed, not on it, which she noticed. A book open in his lap that he wasn't reading. The hood up. "Hi," she said. "Hi, I'm Leonora." "I know," he said. "Mrs. Reyes told me." She looked around the room. There was a poster of a CN Tower on the wall, a shelf of books that had been read many times judging by the cracked spines, and a photograph on the nightstand that she did not look at directly because she could see from the doorway that it was a woman, and she knew whose photograph it was. "Do you want me to sit down?" she said. "Or I can stand, either is fine." He looked up for the first time. "You're asking me. It's your room." He thought about this. "You can sit," he said, and gestured at the beanbag chair in the corner with the gravity of someone much older offering a guest the better seat. She sat. He went back to the book he wasn't reading. She did not try to fill the silence. And something about that, the not trying, shifted the air in the room by a degree or two. After a while he said, "The last lady talked a lot." Leonora said. "About nothing," he clarified. "The worst kind of talking," she said. He looked at her again. "Yeah," he said quietly, "it is." Malcolm came home at 7:30 that first evening, which Mrs. Reyes told Leonora was early for him. He was a tall man, built like someone who had done physical work once and never entirely lost the posture of it, wearing a blazer over a white shirt with the sleeves already rolled up. He looked like a man who had been keeping himself moving because the alternative was to stop. He found Leonora in the kitchen, writing something in a small notebook. "Mrs. Menza Clark," he said. "Mr. Osei," she said. He ate dinner. The oatmeal at breakfast was apparently a protest against the kind of oatmeal, not oatmeal in general. He prefers steel cut. Malcolm stared at her. "I didn't know that. He mentioned it," she said. "Not directly," he said, and I'm quoting, "My mom always did the other kind," and then went quiet. So I made a note. Malcolm looked at the notebook. He looked at her. Something moved across his face that he did not let stay long. "Thank you," he said. "He also has a loose molar he keeps touching with his tongue but hasn't mentioned to you. He might be nervous about the dentist. You'll want to bring it up gently." Malcolm sat down at the kitchen island. It was the gesture of a man whose legs had been holding him up all day by sheer force of will. "The agency said you were between projects," he said. "I am. What kind of projects?" "Technology consulting," she said. "I built a firm. I sold it." He looked at her differently then, recalibrating. She could tell, the way people always did when the information didn't fit the expectation. "Why this?" he said. She considered the true answer, which was complicated and personal, and gave him a portion of it. "I wanted something that mattered at the end of the day," she said. "In a way I could see." He was quiet for a moment. "That's a specific kind of reason." "I'm a specific kind of person," she said, without apology. He almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. In the weeks that followed, the house changed in ways that were difficult to name but easy to feel. Leonora did not reorganize anything dramatically. She did not redecorate or institute new rules or introduce herself to Tobias's world with the energy of someone who had arrived to fix things. She simply paid attention. She learned that he could not sleep before 9:30, not because he wasn't tired, but because the quiet got too loud. She started sitting in the hallway outside his room in the evenings, reading, the light on, door open, not talking. Just there. After 4 days, he stopped fighting the quiet. After 8 days, he started sleeping through the night. She learned that he had been writing letters. Not to anyone living. In a green notebook with a dinosaur on the cover, in handwriting that leaned left the way left-handed children's writing sometimes does. He showed her once, accidentally. She had knocked on his door while he was writing and he had closed it too slowly. "Is that yours?" she said. "Yes." She did not ask what was in it. She said, "I have one of those too, have since I was about your age." "This is about your—" "What do you write in it?" he said. "Whatever I can't say out loud," she said. "Works better than talking sometimes." He thought about this for so long that she thought the conversation was over. "Does it help?" he said finally. "Some days more than others," she said, "but you don't have to feel better for it to be worth doing." He closed the notebook and held it against his chest. "I write to my mom," he said. It was the first time he had said the word to her directly. "Mom." It landed in the room and stayed there. "She can probably hear you better that way than any way else," Leonora said. He looked at her with the clear, undefended look of a child who is deciding whether to trust something. "Do you really think so?" "I do," she said, and she meant it. What she did not know, during those weeks, was that Malcolm knew far less about what happened in that house than she assumed. His travel schedule was what it was. 3 days in Calgary, 2 in Vancouver, a fast turnaround through Montreal. And he called home every night. But phone calls are not the same as presence, and he knew that, and the knowing sat in him like a stone. What he had started doing, and what he would not have admitted easily, was coming home early. Not to talk to Leonora. Not for any reason he had articulated even to himself. He would park in the driveway and sit for a minute before going in, and he would hear, through the kitchen window, which he had never noticed being left open before, the sounds of the house. Tobias laughing. The low register of Leonora's voice reading something aloud. The sound of dishes being washed. He would sit there and listen to the sounds of his home, sounding like a home, and something in his chest would do something he hadn't given it permission to do. He started finding reasons to be home at dinner. Leonora noticed. She said nothing about it, but she noticed. The evening everything shifted. It was a Thursday in March. Malcolm had come home at 5:15. Genuinely early, earlier than even the recent new normal. And instead of coming inside immediately, he had pulled on an old coat he kept in the car and walked around the side of the house to where Tobias had started spending time in the backyard, despite the cold. There was a wooden bench that his wife had loved, and Tobias had quietly started going to it after school, and Malcolm had not known this. He did not announce himself. He stood at the corner of the house, in the shadow, and listened. Tobias was talking to Leonora on the bench. She was in a heavy parka and had a thermos of something, and Tobias was beside her in his coat with the hood up as always, and he was talking in the low, thoughtful way he almost never talked at dinner. "Dad doesn't say her name," Tobias said. Leonora was quiet. "Like he's scared to," Tobias said. "I say it because if I stop, I think I'll forget what it sounds like." "What does it sound like?" Leonora said. "Like her," Tobias said. "Mum." He said it the British way, which was the way his mother had said it. Leonora had learned, because she had grown up in London before coming to Canada. "Mum. That's a good sound," Leonora said. "Do you think he misses her?" "I think your dad misses her so much that it's hard for him to put it anywhere," Leonora said. "Some people, when they're very sad, they keep moving, because if they stop moving, the sad catches up." Tobias was quiet. "Is that bad?" "It's not bad," she said. "It's human. But it means sometimes the people who love them have to be patient." "Are you patient?" "I'm working on it," she said. "Every day." Malcolm stood at the corner of his house, in his old coat, in the March cold, and he did not move for a long time. There was something happening in his chest that he did not have architecture for. He had built warehouses. He had negotiated freight contracts that spanned 3 provinces. He had sat across tables from people who did not believe in him, and made them change their minds through sheer and steady force of will. He had no framework for what was happening to him right now. Listening to a woman talk to his son about grief in a backyard in Toronto, and meaning every word. He went inside through the front door and stood in the hallway for a moment with his coat on. Mrs. Reyes, passing through, said nothing, but she looked at him in a way that suggested she had her own observations about things. The change in Malcolm after that evening was not dramatic. It was more like something that had been braced finally let go. He started saying his wife's name, not constantly, not performatively, but he stopped flinching from it. He said Amara at dinner once, talking to Tobias about a photograph, and the word came out steady, and Tobias looked up at him with an expression so open it nearly broke him. He started being home in the evenings more, not just passing through, actually home. At the table, after dinner, reading near where Tobias was reading, doing the ordinary adjacent companionship that children need without always being able to name. And Leonora stayed on her side of what she understood to be a clear and appropriate line, because she was a woman who had spent her adult life understanding structures and how they worked. And she knew what this was and what it was not. Or she thought she did. It was a Saturday in April when she understood that she had been wrong about something. She had been in the kitchen early, before anyone else was up, making the steel-cut oatmeal that had become standard, and Malcolm had appeared in the doorway, in a gray pullover, with his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, looking like a man who had not yet put on the version of himself he showed the world. "You're here early," he said, though she lived there, and the sentence didn't quite make sense, and he seemed to realize this. "I always am," she said. He came and poured himself coffee, which he did not need her help with, and he stood at the counter near her rather than across the kitchen, which he did not have to do. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Yes," she said. "Why did you stay?" He paused. "The agency told me. The previous 3, they all left, before 4 weeks. And you've been here 2 months and a half." She considered the question carefully, because she had been asking herself the same thing in the honest hour before sleep. "Because he needs someone who isn't going to leave," she said. "He's had enough of that." Malcolm looked at his coffee, "And because I started caring about what happens to him," she said. That's not something I can just reverse. He talks about you, Malcolm said. At school, apparently. His teacher mentioned it. He calls you Lee. She had not known that. Something warm and uncontrolled moved through her. He told me to call him Toby, she said. Last week. Not Tobias. He hasn't let anyone call him that since. Malcolm stopped. I know, she said quietly. He looked at her then, directly, without the careful management he usually applied to looking at her, and what was in his face was not professional gratitude. Leonora, he said. Yes, I'm not good at. He stopped. I haven't had to think about how to say things in a long time. I got used to just deciding things. I know, she said again, and her voice was gentle. I don't want you to leave, he said. And I think I mean more than just. He made a gesture that meant the house, the schedule, the position. More than that. She looked at him. She thought about what it meant to want things and not say so. She had done that for years in boardrooms, held the knowing quietly, let others catch up. She had promised herself she would stop doing it in her personal life. I know what you mean, she said. Do you feel the same? He said. I think you know I do, she said. Or you wouldn't have asked. He almost smiled. The real version of it, this time, the one that changed his face in a way that made him look like someone who had not smiled that way in a long time and had missed it without knowing. We need to be careful, she said. About Toby. About how this goes. He can't lose another person he's attached to. I know that, he said. I mean it, Malcolm. So do I, he said. She held his gaze long enough to decide that he did. They did not rush anything, that was the thing that mattered. They moved the way people move when they have learned, each of them separately, and at some cost, that the things worth having need room to grow. Sunday mornings became something. Tobias, who missed nothing, registered the change in atmospheric pressure between the two adults in his house, and responded by becoming slightly more cheerful in a way he tried to hide, and failed to, because he was 7. In June, Tobias's teacher asked the class to draw their family. He drew 3 people. He showed it to Leonora first, before his father. She looked at the drawing for a long time. 3 figures, crayon rendered. A tall man in what was clearly meant to be a blazer, a small figure in a hoodie, and a woman with dark skin and hair that Tobias had spent considerable effort on, with little coiled details. Is that me? She said. Yes, he said. He was matter-of-fact about it in the way children are when they have decided something and do not understand why it would be complicated. She looked at it again. She did not say anything for a moment, because she could not trust her voice. Toby, she said. What? This is very good. I know, he said with absolute confidence, and she laughed in the way she laughed when something caught her completely off guard, from the chest, real and unguarded, and he laughed too, because her laugh was the kind that made it hard not to. Malcolm found the drawing on the refrigerator that evening, held on by a magnet shaped like a maple leaf. He stood in front of it for a long time. He went to find Tobias. Who put this up? He said, holding it. I did, Tobias said. Malcolm looked at the drawing, the 3 figures, the careful hair. Is this our family? He said. Tobias looked at him with the patience of someone explaining something obvious. Yes, Dad, he said. Obviously. Malcolm nodded slowly. He put the drawing back on the refrigerator. He went to find Leonora. She was in the backyard on Amara's bench, the same place he had stood in shadow in March and overheard things that rearranged him. The evening was warm, the Toronto summer making good on its delayed promise, the light going gold over the row of houses. He sat down beside her. She looked at him. She waited. Toby drew a family, he said. I know. He put you in it, she said. He's right, Malcolm said. I want you to know that. Whatever you decide, whatever happens, he's right. She looked at him for a long time. This man who had spent 4 years building walls, because the alternative was to feel what had happened to him, who had stood in a driveway listening to the sounds of his own home like a stranger, who was sitting here now with his voice steady and his hands open in his lap. I know he is, she said. He reached over and took her hand. Not dramatically. The way you take the hand of someone who you have been reaching for without knowing it, and you finally stop pretending otherwise. The garden around them was exactly the garden it had always been. The bench, the old rose bushes Amara had planted, the gap in the fence where next door's cats sometimes came through. Everything the same, everything completely different. Inside, through the back window, Tobias had found the place on the couch that had the best angle to the backyard. And he sat there with his book open and unread, watching them. And he was smiling in a way he had not been smiling for a very long time. He reached for his green dinosaur notebook. He opened it to the next blank page. He wrote in his leftward-leaning handwriting, "Mum, I think it's going to be okay." He closed the notebook and held it against his chest, the way Leonora had shown him. And the evening light came through the window. And the house felt, finally, like the house it was supposed to be.